the Vice Chancellor, Rashtriya Raksha University, Dr. Bimal Patel, the Director General, Bhaskar Acharya, National Institute of Space Applications and Geoinformatics, BISAC, Dr. Tejpal Singh. I see General Shakatkar here, who's an intellectual giant, somebody who piloted what have come to be known as the Shakatkar reforms, and all the change that you are seeing now, these breaking down of silos in national security, is largely attributable to him. It's great to have you in our midst, sir. Lieutenant General Asit Mistry, the Director, School of Internal Security, Defence and Strategic Studies, SIS DSS, Dr. Venkateshwaran, Director, School of International Cooperation and Strategic Languages, acronymed SICSL, the MG Training Headquarters, Army Training Command, my colleague General Vivek Kashyap, the Commandants of the EME School and the Junior Leaders Academy, General Bikramdeep Singh and Brigadier Gaurav Sharma, Directors, Heads of Faculty of RRU and BISAG, Officers of ARTRAC who are online, students of the two institutions, RRU and BISAG, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning. It is indeed a pleasure to be here at the RRU on the occasion of the signing of MOUs between the Indian Army and RRU, as also the Indian Army and BISAC. As the Chief said, in many ways this is perhaps a historical milestone. My compliments and gratitude to the Vice Chancellor, RRU, the DG BISAG, the MG Training Headquarters, ARTRAC, and the Commandants of the EME School and the JLA for all the hard work and for making this possible. Allow me to begin by making an assertion. And the assertion is this, that the domain of national security increasingly is one of great complexity, growing sophistication, as also humongous change. So let's see how it is becoming so complex and sophisticated. So let's just take the domain of hypersonics, which has been in the news recently with China firing this, what has come to be known as the FOBS. So today, if you have a hypersonic missile which comes, say, in speeds of Mach 7, Mach 8 and beyond, right up to Mach 20, the responses to these missiles, be they in terms of missile defense or interception, cannot be at the rate of human judgment or human reaction. The responses have to be at the rate of machine learning. So unless the defense forces, the Indian Army embraces artificial intelligence and the entire gamut of related technologies, our responses will be feeble. So you see the growing sophistication, the growing complexity. I spoke of humongous change. The pace of change today is such that doctrinal evolution, technological developments today exceed the speed of travel of our procurement cycles. So if you take 3 years to procure an expertise, a domain functionality, or even an equipment, by the time you finish procuring it, doctrines have changed, warfighting methodologies have changed, and the equipment has changed. So this is this fascinating domain of national security. So if you are not nimble and fleet-footed, you shall be outwitted. You shall simply be outwitted. See what's happened in these 4 prominent conflicts, which I'm sure even non-military audiences are familiar with, what happened in Idlib, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Libya, Syria. You had these 2 actors, drone swarms and electronic warfare systems. And their coming together threatened, in fact, overwhelmed the traditional prima donnas of the battlefield. So artillery, armor, they were sent scampering because of somebody's imagination and the great infusion and convergence of mere 2 technologies, drone swarms and electronic warfare systems. So the domain of national security, I will once again assert, is really one of great complexity, growing sophistication, and humongous change. So monumental is the challenge, so great is the pace of change, that no single element or metric of statecraft, be it the instrument of force, which is the defense services, the levers of diplomacy, the military-industrial complex, our technology hubs, no single metric, no matter how efficient or effective, can grapple with the challenge on its own. The Indian Army has the humility to acknowledge the existential reality. We cannot brace up to the challenge on our own steam. In the pursuit of our national security aspirations and objectives, therefore, and you just see the great accumulating strategic adversity around us. We have our friend on our northern borders, we have worrying developments to the west, all that is happening in Afghanistan, the new axes of power that are being formed, and we have the grim competition and struggle for strategic ascendancy along our maritime frontiers. So in the pursuit of our national security aspirations and objectives, in the midst of the grim challenges that I alluded to, every domain in India, every talent, every field of expertise will need to come together. The armed forces, wider defense, scientists, technologists, corporates, SMEs, dreamers, startups, thought leaders, and academia. You know, we often think, or we often say that China is very good at execution. I think it's a misnomer. China leads in ideation. And therefore, the great importance of thought leaders and academic institutions like this. So everybody needs to come together as part of this robust enterprise of cross-pollination, cross-flows of talents and ideas. Everybody will need to fuse their skills and energies if India is to acquire strategic advantage in the intense security competition that engulfs us. Everybody will need to come together if India is to attain its place and promise in the world. Little wonder then that civil-military fusion, and it is fusion, it is not cooperation, not collaboration, but complete and total fusion is the new buzzword in strategic circles globally. I think the Chief alluded to it very briefly. Civil-military fusion, it's the new buzzword. It occupies pole position in the strategic military calculus of most major military powers. The USA, China, Russia, and Israel, most notably. And I'll give you some examples to substantiate what I say. It will only be wise for India to follow suit. And at the centerpiece of civil-military fusion, at the heart of its multifaceted endeavors, lies the concept of thoughtful ideation. I spoke about it, thoughtful ideation. And what is this thoughtful ideation? Well, in the widest sense, it is the ability to think long and think deep. Long and deep. Let me give you a few examples. So you had the Chinese Premier Deng Xiaoping in 1982 saying that if the Middle East has oil, China has rare earths. And from then, it meticulously developed technologies to process rare earths. And today, when it comes to digital combat, digital war fighting, China is the leader. So the vision was propounded in 1982. It takes effect some 4 decades later. So this is thinking long and thinking deep. We have a very prominent strategist in America called Andrew Marshall, advisor to 8 presidents across the political aisle, who in 1984, even as, I think even some years before it, even as the Cold War was at its peak, he cautioned the American strategic community that your real threat 3-4 decades down the line will not be Soviet Union but China. So this is how people think long and think deep. In our own case in India, we had a general called Thakur Nathu Singh, and I recall this with some interest, who in a conversation with Sarojini Naidu sometime in the 1935 or whereabouts, highlighted that at some future point in India's trajectory, it will have a two-front challenge. The two-front challenge that we are talking of now, Pakistan and China. So much years before the Sino-Indian collusion became overly manifest, this is what Thakur Nathu Singh said in a conversation with Sarojini Naidu. So this is, how long and deep we need to think. We need to think imaginatively and with clarity. There has to be absolutely clairvoyant thinking on what we need to do. The power of vigorous and rigorous research, and academies like these, institutions like these, will help the army with the power of research. So research in, say, some domains, the scientific exploration of metamaterials, which the Americans and the Chinese began in the 1980s, has led to what you see stealth technology now. And it all starts in academic institutions like these. Today, OSINT, or what people call open source intelligence, what you have in all social media platforms, articles written here and there. Some people say that OSINT is as powerful as sophisticated intelligence initiatives like the Five Eyes. This Five Eye collaboration between USA, UK, Australia, Canada, and New Zealand, which are really governmental enterprises. They have their own benefits, but OSINT can be as powerful. So I'm emphasizing the power of rigorous research, the traditions of debate and the spirit of inquiry, which I'm sure fosters in institutions like this, what in Hindi we call Vaad Vivad, Tark Vitark, Chintan Manthan. So when these kind of traditions acquire depth, they lead to thoughtful ideation, which in turn powers civil-military fusion. And it is civil-military fusion which in turn will make sure that our national security aspirations, our national security sinews are strengthened. So the link is very direct between academia, the instrument of force, the defense services, and national security. That is the point I wish to make. The virtues of contrarianism, the fostering of alternate viewpoints, which our universities and academic institutions should be very good at. Another advantage that universities like these have is the blending of youthful exuberance of the students. If demographics or youthful demographics is our forte, then the blending of youthful exuberance with the experience, wisdom, and critical thinking of the faculty and professors. If all this comes together, then RRU, BISAC, and the scores of universities that we have will be able to provide thoughtful ideation which will power civil-military fusion, which in turn will strengthen the sinews of our national security. And if you think this is just theory, I'll give you some examples to tell you how nations are vigorously investing in these disciplines of linkages with academia, civil-military fusion. So such thoughtful ideation incubates best, as I said, or should incubate best in universities like the RRU and institutes like BISAC. That should explain the Indian Army's determined outreach to the academic universe, as also the significance of the MOUs that we signed today. So they are not mere documents. There is a lot of thought behind this and a lot of hope. And let me tell you, the challenge is huge. It goes beyond these learning management systems that we have worked out that I had just the pleasure to release. The challenge is huge. So it is with considerable thought and clarity of purpose that we have launched this outreach to academia. We wish, as I said, to tap the power of your ideation to drive the nation's quest for civil-military fusion, which in turn we hope will resource our national security aspirations and objectives. So as I said, there is an obvious and purposeful connect. Somewhere in all this also lies the urge to marry your scholarly attributes with our military combat prowess. They also need to come together because they have a huge role in creating the capacities that we seek. As the Indian Army's Thought and Ideation Center, the Army Training Command or ARTRAC has considerable expertise of its own. We have some of the finest minds in uniform, the best talents, with a wealth of combat experience that help us keep an eye on our strategic military futures, geostrategic trends, doctrinal shifts, the changing character of war, which somebody referred to, new benchmarks in combat capacities, etc., etc. So this whole gamut of security military affairs is also complex. It needs some very fine minds. A modern and dynamic training pedagogy imbued with the best global practices is instrumental or equally instrumental in keeping the Indian Army in the highest state of operational readiness. So this is what ARTRAC does with its 32 CAT establishments and about 48 regimental centers. We have 3 technical training institutions: the College of Military Engineering, the Military College of Telecommunication Engineering, and the MCEME, Military College of Electronics and Mechanical Engineering. 3 training institutions which are driving numerous technology initiatives to help us keep abreast with the humongous change that is sweeping the techno-military landscape. And all these things, work is being done. So from drone swarms to loiter munitions, to the great applications of artificial intelligence. Today you have blockchain in defense, quantum, digital combat, algorithm warfare, AR, VR, exoskeletons, robotics. All these domains of science are finding some very robust applications in defense. And it is these 3 technical training institutions which are driving initiatives in these domains. The technology landscape, and this is once again something for universities like this to ponder over, the technology landscape in the military and wider defense itself is one of ever-expanding opportunities. In the last 2 years itself, and this is just a ballpark figure, the Indian Army, more particularly ARTRAC, has invested close to rupees 260 crores to drive technological endeavors of this kind. So those of you with any interest in defense in the military, you apply your minds to these domains, and there is a great deal to profit from. So as I said, there is a lot of exciting stuff happening in ARTRAC. We are sanguine that this agreement with RRU and BISAC will only help to infuse greater energy and productivity in our endeavors. There is a lot that we could do together. Some of the issues have already been spelled out, but I'd like to widen your horizon. It's not confined to technology. So in matters of statecraft, in geostrategic affairs, in the realm of international relations, for instance, in helping the defense of services craft or fine-tune their Indo-Pacific strategy, in exploring opportunities for India in Eurasia. There's a lovely article by C. Raja Mohan in yesterday's Indian Express regarding this, in developing heft in our strategic partnerships. So the humanities disciplines in these 2 universities, there's a lot of stuff happening. You could help us in that. In hardcore research, I pointed out to metamaterials, quantum, so on and so forth. In refining our training pedagogy. The training pedagogy itself is one of great challenge. In addressing our technology challenges, which are, as I said, in all the domains that I listed, there is huge opportunity is also a challenge. In joint studies, in helping us overcome the challenges associated with language proficiencies. Today, Mandarin is a great challenge for the Indian Armed Forces because of the way our relations are poised with our northern neighbors. In the development of training videos, screening software to assist in recruitment and deep selection, in geoinformatics, as the director BISAC pointed out, in developing softwares and codes. Algorithm warfare will not happen without softwares and codes. In leveraging a range of geospatial technologies, as also in wider capacity building, startups, Atmanirbharta in defense, and all this enterprise that is going on. I must here tell you that the startup experiment with the defense services, especially in the Indian Army, has been one of great satisfaction. We have had some outstanding successes. You would recall, some of you would have seen a swarm of drones being swarmed on Army Day last, And within a period of 9 months, we have developed these swarm drones with combat potential sufficiently so as to be able to place an order of about 200 crores in 9 to 10 months. So this, just tells you that in the academic spaces, all of those of you who have interest in technology and so on, there is great scope for its application and flowering in the domains of the military and wider defense. So the MOUs that we have signed should hopefully be the catalysts for even more meaningful collaboration in a diverse array of domains. And they are extremely challenging. Apart from arousing and energizing the spirit of intellectual inquiry, which is important both for you and for us. The military-academia collaboration that we conceive of must grow in scale and momentum as also accelerate in timelines. It must grow in scale and momentum and accelerate in timelines for a variety of reasons, the most immediate being that our northern neighbor China's military modernization, as those of you who read the newspapers, is really causing a stir in strategic military circles worldwide. The PLA has demonstrated, which is the People's Liberation Army of China, has demonstrated some of the most amazing developments across domains, from undersea to outer space, prompting some analysts to describe the feat as the most massive military modernization in the history of mankind. And a key driver in China's military modernization, interestingly, has been some very inventive and robust military-academia collaboration. The People's Liberation Army, or the PLA, has established deep collaborative ties with 7 elite universities, better known colloquially as the 7 Sons of National Defense. So you have the Beijing Institute of Technology, the Beijing University of Aeronautics and Astrophysics, Harbin Engineering University, the Harbin Institute of Technology, the Nanjing University of Aeronautics and Astronautics, the Nanjing University of Science and Technology, the Northwestern Polytechnical University. These 7 sons have helped power the PLA's modernization drive. These 7 sons, as I said, in turn have crafted important subsidiary relationships with several US tech companies. So that's how this military academia enterprise works. So which are these companies? Autodesk, Dell, Google, Honeywell, IBM, Intel, Microsoft, Rockwell Automation, is also Texas Instruments. And all this is happening as part of an elaborate military and defense research enterprise. This collaborative ecosystem has, over a period of time, also developed close relationships with several Chinese defense companies which contract and supply to the PLA. So you have the Aviation Industry Corporation of China, the China Shipbuilding Industry Corporation, and the China North Industries Corporation, or Norinco, to name just a few. So you see this collaboration between academia, the PLA, US big tech, as also these companies which supply to the PLA. That is how deep-seated this collaboration is. That also points to the great challenge before us. So these relationships not only help develop and foster some cutting-edge research and development in defense, but also provide attractive career pathways for students of the 7 Sons universities. So we see a host of mutually developing relationships at play here. Collaboration, as I said, I began by saying, is the new leitmotif. Civil-military fusion is the new leitmotif in the strategic military calculus of major powers. Now there are other examples, or shall I say examples galore. Just let me name a few once again. So China's national, you see, it is characterized by this global hunt for talent, this collaboration. This is what militaries, the lengths militaries are going to. So China's National University of Defense Technology, under a plan called the 1,000 Talents Plan, has hired 10 top-of-the-line professors from across the world, to include the US Alamos University. It has opened military recruitment stations across the globe in cities like Auckland and Zurich. So that's how military academia collaboration there is going. Global hunt for talent. The PLA has opened defense labs in 160 universities across China. And it's not China alone. The Americans, the US Army Futures Command, has signed MOUs with 300 top colleges and universities. This global hunt and interface with academic talent, I'll give you two great examples. So there is a young Chinese student or somebody with interest in science who wins the national science competition in China, Jian V. Pan. 8 years back, he's picked up by the PLA, sent to the Heidelberg University in Austria, put under the best known name in quantum at that time, Professor Anton Zellinger, and he returns to design the quantum satellite and is now designing the quantum radar. So this is the challenge that we are up against. The Silicon Valley, you have this very great interface. We know how Silicon Valley, big tech and all has virtually remade America. But what is lost sight of, that the Silicon Valley has intimate connects with the Pentagon and Stanford and has a great role to play in what is the American strategic military circles called the third offset strategy, which is basically America's technological response to the challenge posed by Russia and China. Israel, you have these units 8200 and 9300. They have unique talent pipelines where for space, cyber and these cutting edge domains, it's not only military men. They source people from the best universities, use them to develop capacities here and open up links to the Silicon Valley, so on and so forth. And I'll just give you a quick example how all this is not in the realm of theory. So this unit 8200 and 9300, which basically is manned by these young, sharp minds from the world of academia, of course, along with the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force. See how they exploited artificial intelligence in the recent conflict with the Hamas. So they do three things. They use facial recognition techniques to target Hamas commanders. And within 48 hours of the conflict, 7 top Hamas commanders, to include the brigade commander of Gaza and the boss of their cyber division and their technology projects head, they are killed. Facial recognition. They use big data fusion techniques. Hamas has that very formidable tunnel system. And through a complex process, they come to 3 critical points which need to be struck. And in the next 24 hours, the tunnel network is rendered unusable. They devise a software system called the Alchemist, which is used by tank commanders. They are alerted about a minute in advance about missiles being fired. So I just wish to highlight this to tell you the distance that we have to travel. If we have to tap these technologies, if military academia interface has to become real productive, this is what is happening. This is the challenge. And if it is happening in Israel, if it's happening in US, it is also happening in China. In fact, today China's pace of, shall I say, change, the pace of their progress is rattling the Americans. So we really have to come together. Academia, everybody, startups, corporate, the military, we really have to come together in the interest of national security. The US Space Command today is collaborating not with DARPA, but with Elon Musk, civil-military fusion, the private sector. The JEDI, which is basically the cloud computing contract of the US military, years back it would have gone to some government agency. Today, who's bidding for it? Microsoft and Amazon. So here is a challenge for BISAC. If you look at our cloud computing, we need cloud computing and our big data and all to come together. So in a somewhat similar vein, our homegrown experimentation in military academia collaboration, as it expands, we also could look at the creation of such linkages. And that is the centerpiece of what I have to tell you. We need to create such linkages between our centers of learning and knowledge, symbolized by goddess Saraswati, our nodes of commercial excellence, enterprise and wealth creation, Lakshmi, to strengthen the sinews of our defense and national security, Durga. And that is what is happening around the globe. That is, I think, what we need to do. In my view, the wisdom and skill with which we can conceive and develop pathways for the coming together of these 3 representative icons of Saraswati, Lakshmi and Durga will determine India's place in the international pecking order and its salience in the world. This is what I began by saying, and this is how I think it will come to an end. Let me just make a couple of random points from the proceedings of the day. So I think Dr. Venkateshwaran made this very interesting point about how the pandemic should force us to draw another lesson. And what is that lesson? That lesson is that if everything today is national security, everybody must come together. So how is everything national security? We were always told that, you see, national security is wider than the military, it is wider than defense. But I think it came out most strikingly in the pandemic. So the pandemic, which began as a health crisis, ended up being a major national security event. So first we had these techno-alliances, we had these battles between vaccines, mRNA vaccines, vector-based vaccines. So you find competitiveness, diplomacy, strategic competition creeping into all this. You have this challenge of interdependent supply chains, which means that no single product, no single vaccine comes from one geography. You need to have these alliances to get even the vaccine together. And the moment you have that, you have power play and the hard ball of strategic competition coming in. And then suddenly you see, before that, you have Pfizer, I'm told, in exchange for its vaccine supply to Argentina, sought by way of sovereign guarantees military bases. So they said, give us military bases and we'll give you vaccines. So this is how this pandemic panned out. And then you had this brutal geopolitics. I'm told even as the global GDP fell by about 4.2% in the period, military expenditures went up by 2.8%. And brutal geopolitics, you saw what happened in the South China Sea, what happened in the East China Sea, everything that's happening in the Indo-Pacific, AUKUS, and of course, what happened most intimately is what happened on the LAC, the line of actual control with China. So what began as a mere health crisis turned out to be a national security event. So it leads me to conclude that all of us need to take a very wide-angle view of national security. It cannot be silos. For 70 years we've grown in these silos. Indian Army, technology, DRDO, academia, apni jagah pe. These silos need to break. And General Shekatkar is here. I think one of his central contributions to national security is that through the Shekatkar reforms, he advocated the complete dissolution of these silos. Because these silos are the biggest roadblock in our progress. So that's one point. There's somebody, I think we released this Chanakya journal. So I just want to, through a quote of Chanakya, emphasize the salience of force in our wider statecraft, because that linkage is equally important. If we analyze the salience of force in our wider statecraft, then we will see the need to synergize all the elements of statecraft. And see, what is this quote of Chanakya? I think it shows, homegrown wisdom, ideational clarity and clairvoyance at its very best. So many years back he said, कि यदि शास्त्रों को भूलोगे, if you forget your civilizational texts, यदि शास्त्रों को भूलोगे तो अपनी संस्कृति खो दोगे. You might lose your culture. But यदि शस्त्र का त्याग करोगे तो अपना राष्ट्र ही खो दोगे. Look at the wisdom of that man. It's not to say that the military should power everything, but it is to suggest that the military does need to have, or the instruments of hard power should be equally salient in our statecraft. This is Chanakya, so many years back. The Vice Chancellor made this point about strategy, how important strategy is. And I thought I'll drive home that point with this adage which is very familiar to us in uniform. It's not to say that tactics is not important. Tactics and the small things that happen are hugely important. In fact, one of the lessons of Afghanistan is that. What is happening in Kashmir reminds us every day. But yet, the overwhelming importance of strategy, deep thinking with clarity, which must come out of institutions like this. So the adage is that strategy without tactics is the slowest route to victory. So if you get your tactics wrong and your strategy is right, you may just reach your objective. But tactics without strategy is simply the noise before defeat. So Iraq and Afghanistan, the American involvement The tactics was good, but since the larger strategy was wrong, all these 20 years was simply the noise before defeat. So that should emphasize the importance of strategy. And finally, this whole argument about the need to fuse scholarly pursuits and combat attributes. It is so important. I think it was Thucydides who said that a nation that draws a sharp distinction between its soldiers and its scholars will have its thinking done by cowards and its fighting done by fools. So I think we should remember the wisdom of this, dissolve all silos. Academia and the military must come together. We must fuse our capacities, and civil-military fusion is a very powerful tool, and it is the need of the hour, especially in the light of all the examples that I have given you, if we have to strengthen our national security. So with these words, I once again wish these collaborative ventures between the Indian Army, the RRU and BISAG all the best, and earnestly hope and pray that in the years and decades ahead, they contribute in significant measure to the remaking and rejuvenation of India's defense enterprise. Thank you and Jai Hind. Thank you.